I'm James Calicut, waterfowl and upland game bird extension specialist.
I'm Mark McConnell, Assistant Professor of Upland Birds at Mississippi State University.
Dr. Brian Davis, Professor, Waterfowl and Wetlands Conservation.
The three of us are all biologists and hunters. Join us for discussions about game bird conservation and management and the science behind it. Of course, we'll also have conversations about bird dogs and bird hunting as well. This is Game Bird University.
All right, we've got a great episode today. We're a little later than I would have wanted for this episode. We're supposed to have having one out in November prior to duck season, but trapping ducks and other things have gotten in the way, and Ryan's been busy, our guest today. But it's going to be a great conversation because I have a longtime friend and colleague, Ryan Dulaney. He is the manager of Grindle Slough in Arkansas, among other things, and he's a wealth of knowledge on habitat management for waterfowl, and whether that's the property level, landscape level, what have you. So he's definitely been around the block both in Mississippi and Arkansas when it comes to waterfowl management. And we go back a long ways, back to digging through dirt for seeds back in the lab and at Mississippi State way back when. So Ryan, thanks for coming on today. Thanks for joining me.
Hey man, good morning. Happy to be here. Looking forward to diving into some duck stuff.
Yeah. So let's maybe just talk about kind of like what we're seeing right now and how things are going. I think this is, shaping up at least to be a little bit more what we like to see than we have in the last couple of years anyway. As far as we're getting some water, we're getting some weather, things are looking more ducky than they have historically. It may not be like what it was, many years ago, but at least better than the last couple of years. So I'm a little optimistic, but so far I've been seeing decent numbers in Mississippi, but as we'll talk about later, there's a little difference in the timing of some of these migrants, whether we're talking about our other dabblers or mallards, and then it's a little bit difference in these mallards, they're early ones than the ones that are going to come later and that sort of thing. But so far we're having some birds in the Delta, and habitat's shaping up a little bit better than it typically does for this time of year. State aerial waterfowl surveys were up, at least from Mississippi. I don't know if Arkansas's have come out yet, but tell me what you're seeing on your side of the river.
Yeah, so we're recording this during closed season in Arkansas and Mississippi. It is starting to feel like duck season though, for real this time, and we're thankful for that, especially occurring during a split, allowing some birds to probably move around and get into the areas that most of our southern hunters get to enjoy hunting. And over the last 2 weeks, Arkansas's kind of had a yo-yo weather, and it's been interesting to hunt. Progressively has improved. Northeast half of the state's really not great in terms of quality of habitat right now. We're behind schedule on a lot of water. I don't see birds setting up shop quite as heavily as maybe in years past up there. And I think Mississippi's surveys might show some of that as well, that birds have pushed through Arkansas and found better habitat elsewhere. Our opener was kind of on par with where it has been the last few years, relatively dry conditions. We had several 70, 80 degree even days leading up to the opener, which was rough on surface water and made pumping a little more challenging. And certainly our opening day was more mosquitoes for some people than ducks. But most folks found success, at least the first day. Sunday was hit or miss during the week. Hit or miss is always the norm for Arkansas opener. People that have, enough habitat, a complex on their property or around their property, were able to find success, target, groups of birds and using areas that they could ambush, and make good bags out of it. But Mississippi, the properties that we have managed there, better than expected, I would say. And I think the surveys that Houston Havens has put out indicate that we are trending in the right direction. As we're recording this, we've got a lot of weather moving through, which is improving bird numbers, not necessarily habitat in Arkansas, but bird numbers are increasing. And those birds should have time to settle in. And I would only assume that portions of the north and middle delta of Mississippi are probably experiencing similar things.
Yeah, for sure. And, got to get a bit of rain yesterday. And so anybody that, I'm sure there's folks out there trying to catch that free water too. And so probably the habitat for those who took advantage of it, some wetland acres getting added to the delta for sure, the north delta. I know if my structure won't stop leaking, I was doing my best to catch that. Well, I caught it. We'll just see if I held on to it. But yeah, so there's the weather, good weather, moving some birds in, and I've definitely, in my time over in the Delta these last few weeks, it's definitely picking up for sure as far as bird numbers. But it's like typical. It's a little different in the fact that like we are wetter than we normally are, and so
Absolutely.
that definitely influences like what our typical opening weekend concentration of birds is. It doesn't look quite exactly like that. I mean, those places have birds, but it's with the weather we've had, that you would think they would have a little bit more. And there's some odd places that are holding ducks. That's just because we got the rain to have water there this time of year, and we typically don't. So that's kind of changed up distribution a little bit, and that's one thing I think a lot of folks don't consider as much. It's like, we get used to opening weekends being dry, and when they get
Yes.
wet, it's different. But those birds are in different places, and we're fortunate with the weather this time a little bit, but still you're dealing with not your peak duck abundance. And when you add more habitat in the landscape, that those birds are stretched a little bit from how we perceive them from the blind too. So you might have overall higher counts of ducks observed in the Delta, but how you see those on the landscape highly depends on how they're distributed across how much habitat is there. And there's a little more habitat than there typically is this time of year.
Yes, there definitely is. I would say Mississippi has got the distribution thing going in the right direction right now, where birds have got some available habitat to dodge pressure and likely can set up shop for this winter, and will welcome in, this fresh movement of ducks from the north that is likely blowing in with the weather. I would say Arkansas is just not in the same boat right now. The distributions are really predictable just because of we're not in a serious drought situation like we maybe have been the last couple years. We're improved, but we do not have enough surface water, scattered around in natural water
Mm-hmm.
to house the birds that we typically want to see with this type of weather, right?
Yeah.
With these high temperatures, in the mid 30s and sleet and snow, we're getting that in late December, early January. We've had some rainfall. We've got plenty of places for ducks to house and create, a pattern of usage across the landscape. Right now, we just don't have that. And so this might work out really well for Mississippi this year as these mallards are moving through. They're not finding what they need. The clubs that have been doing this waterfowl management thing intensively for a long time, they see the need out there and they're going to put the water out, whether that's relifting from surface water or unfortunately having it potentially come out of the groundwater and put that amount of habitat out there to house these ducks. They're going to do it. And so those areas are going to be productive. They're going to have ducks. It's going to be very predictable.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm looking forward to Mississippi having an improved season just based on where we're starting. And I do believe that, based on long range forecasts for some more rainfall, that, this might really pan out to be a nice steady December when we really haven't had good December hunting in Arkansas or Mississippi in several years.
No, we really haven't. I think the last time I can remember, I can't remember the last steady December that we had.
Yeah.
Actually, it's been so long.
It's been a while. It's a lot of times if we get the rainfall, it's been real humid and hot,
Yeah.
and birds are hung up in northeast Arkansas, and
Yeah.
I'm just not seeing any reason for ducks to stick around up here with our rivers as low as they are, with current GTR management and the amount of hunting pressure. It's just it's not an attractive place currently.
Yeah.
And and as long as Mississippi is getting its rainfall and temperatures stay where they're at, the food resources look great down there.
Yeah.
And we've got the table's been set on a lot of WRP properties, and a lot of conservation work is probably going to show dividends and pay dividends this year. I'm optimistic that, once these birds get down into mid-Delta, South Delta, they're going to have everything they need.
Yeah.
The landowners I work with down there have done an excellent job of providing that this year. Been very impressed driving around. And I believe the refuge system likely has been benefiting from consistent rainfall, and that's what they need.
Yeah.
They don't need just winter rain. They need rainfall throughout the growing season in order to put that duck food out there.
For sure. And, we kind of started off in an odd place with that. Luckily, at least in the North Delta, the refuges that I'd been on for some of our research purposes, the shutdown obviously occurred at a terrible time as far as if you're pumping or something. Yep. And so one good thing, though, that I think that they had done is it looked like all the prep work was ready. So
Absolutely.
the day they came back to work, they could turn pumps on. They weren't having to get out there and disc strips or doing any rolling they needed to do. That was done. So I think they're slowly getting up back on track with, but they also did totally catch some of that, some of these rains and such. But one thing I think about when it comes to December is I hope we do have at least some steady cold fronts pushing some new birds in. Because one thing that often, I think I can remember, I'm trying to think which year it was. I don't know if it was maybe it was the 12-13 season or so. We got really cold in November. Of course, we didn't have this much water at that year. But I do remember opening weekend just being incredible. I remember running that was when we still had a preseason youth day in Mississippi, and I remember I was working for the state agency, and I was working one of the public areas for the youth weekend. I mean, it was just big ducks galore. Everything was mallards and gadwall, pintails, and those kids were having a great hunt. And I was riding around some portions of the area and just scouting around, seeing where birds were. And I mean, it was incredible for that time of the year, way beyond our typical early mallard numbers. It was like kind of like we got our whatever we were going to get in December, we already had, kind of thing.
Yep.
And the
you
only
got to
thing,
have enough area for them. I mean,
yeah,
it can be short-lived success. I think, shooting ducks in the barrel concept it's fun for a day, but it does not bode well for long-term success throughout the season. And
no,
our management strategy is always consistency. We want
yes,
to be consistent from the first day of the season all the way to the end, the same experience for our guests. And because of that, we put a lot of emphasis on making sure, we're not just creating a waterfowl dense situation, but we've got enough habitat and pressures, metered enough to where it's not it's not short-lived, one and done. And I think that's what you got to be careful with early cold fronts. You
yes,
got to have a habitat to go with it. Otherwise, it doesn't pan out as
yeah,
good as everyone's expectation level is, and then people get very frustrated that, hey,
yeah,
I only got a day out of this. Well, I mean, you can put all the ducks in the region you want. If they don't have enough room to make a living, they're going to blow out, and they're going to go find places they can.
yeah, for sure. And that's what I was going to lead into, is that year is exactly that. I think about when I talked to certain properties, it was fine. Like it was great season, folks who have a lot of habitat, or they're in a place where there's a lot of wetlands surrounding that property, and the hunting pressure is managed at the right way. But for most of everybody else, you went into this, instead of a 2-week lull in December, went into the month-long lull. And it's not because the ducks weren't here. It's like, well, we got them all, now they're stale. And, and unless you have that situation where you can hold birds and you're doing your pressure, managing your pressure right, and you can kind of carry yourself through that, yeah, it's going to be a lull, and that's why.
Well, the stale December duck is a real thing, and it's more of a factor now with the older cohorts that we have. When we had great production on the prairies and a lot of hatch years, you could get away with a lot more. But these ducks, they're going to figure out the game much faster, and some of them are what we're calling a calendar, migrator or early season, arriver. They've got a strategy that really, really leans into figuring a spot out and making it work for the entire wintering period. So that's their strategy. You got to understand that's an old wise duck. He's going to beat you at your game. So the December lull, I think, is either weather driven, you just don't have the duck numbers around. But years that we've had the duck numbers around, we've just educated the heck out of them right off the bat. And when we get these types of ducks, we got to be really light on them to start.
Yeah, for sure. And that's kind of what I tell people. This same situation can happen anywhere along the flyway, really. Because I think of, I've had years, there for a while, me and all my grad school buddies, we would go to North Dakota every year together, and that was our time to get back together and hunt. And we had one trip up there. It was as hot in North Dakota as it was back home in Mississippi. Which is terrible. I was like, that was the main thing to look forward to, is it wasn't going to be hot. But it was warm. We were hunting the birds that had either moved into the area or those that just, had settled there during the summer, and no real new pushes of birds into that area from Canada, and it was like hunting ducks the last week of the season in Mississippi. It was super hard to hunt them. They were super wary. If you hunted potholes, they landed in the middle and swam to the edges because they'd figured out don't land anywhere near the cattails. In dry fields that normally you're on the X, and a flock of 200 should just dump right in on your decoys. They're going to circle you for 20 minutes, and then like 20 of them might break off and decoy, you know. So it was wildly different than anything we'd seen up there. And so it just shows you that when there's no birds moving into the area and there's active hunting going on, they adjust to the pressure and they figure things out. And like you said, if you don't have a plan for that, and that's why I think WMAs, our public hunting areas, have to try to create some balance of providing as much opportunity to people as possible, but also providing some level of sanctuary to keep that success up. So in Mississippi, you have everything from 2-day-a-week draw areas to 3-day-a-week open access to 7-day-a-week open access. And so on those 7-day-a-week open access areas, you know, folks that are successful on those are going to have really put in a tremendous amount of time and effort to find those ducks that are using there. And those 7-day areas can be great on days where it's a flight day and new birds are moving in, but they get stale quick, and you're going to have to work a lot harder to kill those ducks. And that's a challenge as a public agency with only so much land to be able to adequately have all those things addressed. One, plenty of opportunity for someone to have a place to go, and then two, be able to have them managed pressure-wise in a way that sustains through a lull like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough on private landowners too that are dealing with under 120 acres. And, you know, we've got to find strategies that work for them to balance the amount of opportunity that they want or become used to a lot of times is the case. But, you know, something I have to kind of repeat with landowners on a regular basis is, man, quality habitat does not exist with a gun in it. I mean, we can manage habitat so intensively. We can do every little item that's necessary to meet a duck's needs. But if we're not providing an opportunity for those ducks to get in there and utilize it, then it doesn't even count. It's not moving the needle for the area, for the landscape, or for the birds that want to use your property. So, you know, the balance is everything with the hunting pressure. And you know, these small properties, small landowners, have got to do everything they can to come up with a hunting system and a strategy that works well for what their goals are, but also meets the level of intensity of their habitat management. You know, you can plant 150 acres of corn, spend every dollar you've got in a savings account, but if you're there from sun up to sundown with 6 of your buddies, man, it's just not a lot of utilization there from the resources. I don't know that we've got really good grasp on that yet, but I think the telemetry is going to show that in some of these places that, you know, it doesn't matter what you do for habitat management. If you're not providing opportunities for these birds to utilize your property, it's all waste.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, Brad Cohen over in Tennessee Tech is doing a lot of seems to be now pulling a lot of disturbance questions into some of his research. So I'm really interested to find out what he finds out of some of that. And we've got some plans to do some of that here. It's like we've talked about on this podcast before. I mean, sanctuary disturbance is like one of the hardest things in research to measure, because there's so many different variables at play there that can, you know, it'd be hard to account for everything. You know, it's
certainly on a fine scale it is.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the one thing that general duck hunters that are interested in this type of stuff don't account for is, man, the habitat type, the landscape, the cover type. That really drives. They're not created equal. That drives how sanctuary is how important it is, and how much is needed. And we don't do a good job of that. We kind of just put everything on the same grading scale, and really it's apples to oranges across the board with this stuff, you know. And different habitat types are serving different needs different times of year. And so sanctuary, its best use probably needs to be applied in a manner that meets the needs of birds throughout the winter.
Yeah.
And not just what's convenient for the landowner or convenient for the WMA. It's not a convenience thing. It's a bird utilization and biological needs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so if you think about, if you just looked at mallards in particular, you know, the changes in its habitat use and its diet and things over the course of the winter associated with its life cycle events and its biological needs at any given time throughout that winter is, you know, I think we don't think as much about, we just think about, let's not mess with them. Not like, well,
Yeah.
let's take where how do we take it to the point from well, let's not mess with them to for the first part of the season we're not messing with them here, and then
Yeah.
the next
That's
part
right.
of the season we're not messing with them. We're not going to mess with them in the shrub
I think
as
that's
it
a
gets
great
later.
strategy.
Yeah,
I love involuntary, just 100% permanent sanctuary on a property, but that
oh yeah,
really is only great on scale. You need to be a large landowner to pull that off and to
yeah,
have that. And a tough conversation I have with clients on this stuff is when they have something that just sticks out to me as a great sanctuary location, but it's their best duck hole. And I say, well, it's unfortunate, but for long-term success, 10, 20 years down the road, we need to convert your best duck hole to sanctuary. And it's typically permanent water or shrub or
mm-hmm.
as subject to changes based on rainfall. It's flashy system, all these different things, but it's where ducks end up when they first move into place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an attractive location for ducks. That's where we want them to go and
Mm-hmm.
set up shop, because from there they're gonna spoke off and really provide us with opportunity.
Yeah,
And if I get say 600 or 700 mallards show up on property overnight, and the X over there has become the sanctuary, well, they're gonna set up shop, and I'm gonna have 3 or 4 days of trying to figure out their pattern and probably trick some.
mm-hmm.
But it's a tough pill to swallow for landowners, and I totally get it. When you've
Yeah,
got past history in a spot, you just want to continue to go do it and do it again. And
yeah,
and when somebody's asking you to, sacrifice this location for providing these birds, really what they need is a place to just get away from you. It's this tough decision. But the folks that do it typically see really positive results 2, 3, and 4 years in. It's quick enough for them to stick with it.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's always going to be a difficult conversation to have with folks when you're trying to figure out what's best to hold birds on their property.
But your solution there is awesome, because it's just, hey, we're going to let the life cycle of these birds
Yeah,
kind of dictate where we hunt them. And that's the strategy we use with deer hunting. I mean, I
yeah,
hate to give the deer hunters any more credit than they
yeah,
need, but man, bow hunters have figured out how to target the species. And if waterfowlers can start embracing kind of some of these strategies, I think they'll be better at it.
yeah,
And as these ducks get older, we're going to have to chase them very similarly.
yeah. I think that's definitely the case. It's because it's how we manage for waterfowl and everything else. And it's like I tell my students, no matter what the critter is that you're managing for, it's like the first thing you're gonna have to figure out, apart from learning this new landscape that you're dropped into, and you're gonna have to be a professional and provide technical guidance to someone, is you need to understand life history, whatever that critter is that you have. What do they need and when do they need it throughout the year? And you need to make sure you're providing those things that are going to make them available that time of the year, and they're in a spatial arrangement where those critters can use it. And so, look at what a mallard's to-do list is in winter, and then based on that, and then look around. If you're just this one, like you said, the smaller properties that don't have 1,000 to 2,000 plus acres, that they're 100 to 300 acres, kind of thing. You might need to be looking around that landscape and saying, okay, these are the things that a duck needs throughout winter. What's missing around me?
Yeah,
What can
it's
I
just
add?
deficit
all that.
management.
Yeah,
It's 100% the strategy across
yeah,
the board in the MAV. I've always said that, man, it's deficit management. But a key point in that, right, is you've got to have the understanding what deficits are, what your constraints are.
hmm
You got to communicate with your neighbors.
yeah.
Again, we're going back and giving deer hunters credit. I mean, man,
They've
uh,
done that.
they've done that, and we have not. We're competitive by nature, I think, and
hmm
we have to listen to our neighbors, and deer hunters typically don't. They might hear a shot or two, but we got to listen to them all morning, and we get very envious of their success. But the reality is, if we are co-oping with management, making sure, hey, this is what my property does well, this is what your property does well, or financially, you're in a position to do this, and I'm not,
hmm
and working together to create that complex of wetlands that
hmm
meet the life cycle needs, we're all going to have our opportunity at these birds that we're housing throughout the
Yep.
winter. And it might not be that I'm shooting them opening day, but man, if I've got the last 3 weeks and they're jam up, I'll take it.
Yeah. It's way better than just doing whatever it is that you think you need to be,
Or
whatever's
it's
going to
better than
draw.
spending a bunch of money or trying to buy everyone out.
Yeah.
It's a conversation you have to have with guys that really want to buy properties and expand. You don't need to.
Yeah.
We need to manage what you have and do a good job on that, buying everything around you is just going to put more constraint on our management of what you have now.
Exactly.
And let's do what you do well here. Manage for the constraints or the deficits in your area, your immediate area, and be okay with saying, hey, those guys over there, I want them to be successful. Because guess what? If they're successful, they're going to be invested into doing what needs to be done to make your area better.
Because like you and I have had the conversation many times, Ryan, it is the fact that I don't know that we need to get to a point where we adequately quantify this so we have some actual data. This is obviously fairly anecdotal.
Sure.
Just our experiences of traversing the Delta for the last, so yeah, I would say, it's not to say everywhere, because there are certainly some places that have improved in waterfowl habitat conditions in a certain area. But overall, I mean, just winter water and food availability in ag, in the working portion, which is the vast majority of our Delta,
currently,
and has dwindled. There's not as much winter. Practices have changed in which, how early we plant, how early is harvest, no telling how much more efficient, combines and such are. And then we're finishing up soon enough that we can do fall tillage, so we don't have to worry about spring rains and all these things. And then, just like I said, lack of a lot of people, or a lot of acres that used to be flooded aren't flooded anymore. And I think we're seeing, the landscape as a whole not being as great as it once was to attract. I think an easy way I thought I put it the other day was like, I don't know if our landscape is as sticky to ducks as it used to be.
It's a great term.
Yeah, and
it's a great term. It's short lived, and they move around and find out that this is not what they signed up for.
Yeah, and it's like, okay,
well, I'm going to go somewhere else. That's a good point, though, James, because we have added some great habitat in some of these private land complexes, but it pales in comparison to what we've lost. So, I'd love to know the data behind this. Is like, how many acres have we added in intensive management on duck clubs and WMAs and hopefully improvements on national wildlife refuge? How many have we added versus, the degradation and the loss that we're experiencing, and what that rate is that?
Yeah, that's something that we're trying. Of course, we've got some other reasons to dig into some of the winter water stuff for some other research questions we have going on, and that's one of the ones that's nested within what we've got on tab to work on, and or are currently working on with a lot of remote sensing folks and folks that have the skill sets to quantify this that our typical duck biologist doesn't have. So we're collaborating with those folks to try to get at some of that. But certainly it's like I said, it's managing things is at especially for a duck that's highly mobile and is thinking about it at the landscape scale. How do they select the landscape, and then once they get down into the landscape, how are they selecting their habitat use? And so you go back to the person that's got 4 neighbors, and they're hearing them shoot, and they've got 150 or 200 acres, and the landowner next door has 3,000, and whatever. And if that landowner next door plants a huge portion of their sanctuary in standing corn or something, taking every bit of your manageable acreage and putting standing corn on it, I don't think it's going to be the right decision. I don't think you're going to draw those birds off of it. You need to find what is it else they need. So if that other person is just pure hot crops, well, maybe some really, really well managed moist soil and thinking about some cover and structure to some wetlands is what's going to draw birds to you.
Good duck hole is going to outcompete corn in Mississippi.
Oh, every day,
every time, and it's not even close. Yeah. And to be able to manipulate your duck hole, mow, roll disc, put the ducks right on top of you. I mean, you just can't do that in the flooded agricultural crops. You're not. If you did, you wouldn't be that successful. I'm blown away that folks are willing to spend so much money on chasing the idea of 150 to 200 bushel corn crop on really poor sites. And when it doesn't work out, they're upset. And then when they don't shoot ducks on it, they're really bummed. And I think it goes back to sometimes if you're willing to spend that kind of money on managing your property, you need to have some professional help. At least get your thoughts in order and get a game plan. Hire somebody or call your state agency or Ducks Unlimited. Get some technical guidance before you go put in crazy amount of infrastructure or put that planter and that herbicide in that field.
Yeah.
have a strategy in place, and have a contingency plan when things don't go as planned, because they will.
Yeah. And it's like every duck season is different, and that's what the main thing we've been talking about up to this point, it's a lot about, habitat conditions and weather and all these things. But every summer is different too. So as you're managing those areas, things are going to be different and you're going to take different management actions. And if you switch to a new type of management, like you are going to do intensive moist soil management, that's a learning curve right there that you're going to have to stick with. It's just like anything else, it's kind of like adoption in cropping systems. One of the more difficult things about getting a producer to adopt a new practice is that they're probably going to have to do it 3 to 4 years before they A, get it down pat, but B, start seeing the value from the new practice. And, you're dealing with your actual dollars and cents in your bank account there. And so that's obviously a quick thing to say, okay, well, if I'm not seeing a value from this pretty quick, I'm going to have to switch back to what I was doing. So there's difficulty in adoption of certain practices because of that. But it's the same way in waterfowl hunting or waterfowl management. Because like, okay, I'm switching to this and I'm having to figure this out. And if our currency, well, there's obviously some financial investment and things like that into the management. But if our currency is your hunting success, your waterfowl numbers, it's real quick to say, well, if I didn't all of a sudden start seeing
Yes.
my success go up, and I gotta go back to
We're going
planting
to abort mission.
yeah, I gotta go back to planting food plots.
Well, the consistency is the point to drive home here. So with waterfowl, consistency is everything. And, these things need to leave their summer and early fall destinations. They need to have the GPS pointed in your direction. Well, in order for them to do that, they got to know what's waiting on them. And I see that every day. I watch ducks on a daily basis all season, 140, 150 days a year. I'm watching ducks, and these things show up with a game plan. They know the program when they get here for the most part, but the consistency is what gets ducks to act that way. And that is what puts ducks in front of gun barrels, is consistent management. So for folks that are going in and trying to do a hot cropping system across the board, a blanket approach, which is just devastating a lot of times to quality habitats, because diversity is really what we need to be looking at. But folks that take the blanket approach to hot cropping, they're subject to a lot of variability year to year, like you mentioned in the summer. And you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And we don't do that in investing. We should not do that in waterfowl management. And the challenge with getting people to stick to something long enough is just like you said. I didn't see instant results. Well, waterfowl imprint, and if we can tap into their instincts and their behavior, we can be successful. But in order to do that, we have to be consistent year in, year out. Great Moist Soil does that. Component of moist soil, mowed strips, disc, the same areas in front of blinds. Birds will hit the same hole year after year after year, the same portion of an impoundment.
Oh, yeah.
Sprinkle in your hot crop as a component, or your plantings as a component, but only do it where the site is conducive. Again, hire a professional to come out there and give you that assessment and tell you where those sites are, rather than, hey, I'm going to figure it out trial and error. There's people that are professionals that have done the trial and error for you. They're going to save you the time, energy, and money and get you to that successful point a lot faster. And moist soil management is something that absolutely takes time, because if you have been doing the hot cropping systems, you've likely had enough herbicide and enough poorly timed disturbance to set yourself up for not necessarily a great response. Now, that being said, some rice production, some other things like that really do promote great moist soil.
Yeah.
But in general, you cannot expect to pivot into a quality, diverse moist soil stand year one. So we've got to progress. When we've got to stick to that game plan, and then we've got to be consistent with having that early water, or having that water scaling up as the season goes on despite rainfall. And those are the things that I want to stress to landowners more than, hey, what is growing out there, and what does it look like, and does it give me confidence? It's if it looks good to you, that's fine, but it needs to look good to your target species.
Absolutely. And that's something that, I try to communicate to landowners a lot is just, you have to think about more so from the duck experience. I mean, how many times, I always reference to them, like, how many times are you driving down the road or you cross over a bayou or something and you just see mallards all stretched down that, or you see them in some little patch of something that you're like, oh, that looks really nasty. And there's just a pile of ducks in there, some of that they may be thinking, okay, well, that's just because nobody's hunting them there. Yeah, that has something to do with it. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that that's got the things they need in it and they're not finding it somewhere else in the landscape. And so, thinking more in terms of what a duck needs and what makes a unit attractive to ducks, it's kind of like, if you have harvested rice fields, I mean, maybe not rolling 100% of the field where it looks like a lake. That's not going to be very attractive from the air to a duck, when they're looking at that high level of like, what cues do I look for to select where I'm going to go and sample the actual wetland? Some interspersion of that stubble is what's going to make it look like a wetland, and so there's little things like that. We may do the same thing. That's one thing that attracts them to moist soil, is the fact that there is that interspersion of open water and standing vegetation. He has a war on coffee beans, but hey man, some component of those things in there to give it some structure is great. And I'm not Ryan Astor tonight.
It's poor man's corn. I just we've got to quit this war on vertical structure.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what that standing corn does for birds. Obviously,
the
they're eating a ton of corn.
The yields are, I mean, I'm fortunate to grow corn on irrigated cropland and sandy loam soils. I mean, Callaway silt loams, quality stuff, and I've got control over what's going on. But the vast majority of landowners don't. So,
they don't.
If we're housing ducks in flooded corn and there's not a whole lot of seed available, or it's warm, why are we doing that versus just having strips of coffee wheat? It's from the air into a duck. The coffee weed serves the same exact purpose. Now, again, it goes back to what the landowner sees when he walks out there. Does it give him a high level of confidence? Probably doesn't. But that's just not what should drive management.
No, just to put everybody's visual perspective into, we're talking about patches of coffee weed that have good vegetation growing under them, that are providing food, And
coffee weed's a great late season emerger. Focus on growing the grasses that are necessary to feed ducks and all puddle ducks that like. And when you get the late flush, basically your yield's set already. Those grasses are going to do their thing. So maybe that late application of Blazer or 2,4-D or dicamba,
really
if you can do it, it's probably not necessary. If you're dealing with some woody vegetation in the fall, like trumpet creeper or red vine or any of these things that potentially can really set you back in terms of grass production.
Absolutely.
Then we need to look at doing a pre-frost application of herbicide in order to knock that back for the spring. So when you do your drawdowns, you've got that soil exposed and you don't have creeping woody vegetation out competing you right off the bat.
Yeah, exactly. And so, just obviously there's times when you have some things that you do need to take some herbicide action late in the year, or more into the fall, like you said, red vine issues like that, things that you're, a little more aggressive type things, like you said, vines or woody things. And when they're going to be when they're going to be sending most everything to the roots in the fall, that's the reason to apply it then, But like coffee weed, when you're past the point, like I think about treating coffee weed is when you're getting that first vegetation response, and you see those little,
it's going to be a problem.
And you see those little coffee beans up, and you see all this like grassy looking stuff that you probably can't identify at that point. But like, yes, we probably need to knock that
and
coffee weed
we don't
back.
have to spray. We can just mow it, for goodness sakes. Keep the chemical away for a little while and hold those cards for later. That's a cleanup situation. But we get flushes of coffee weed in Mississippi just because it's so dang hot. And the reality is, our wetlands, we can't do as slow a drawdowns as we'd like to probably get the best stratification along topography of germination. By the book, that's great, but an application for a landowner, hey, I only have a couple weekends I can get my duck holes ready. Coffee wheat's probably going to be a quick, fast emerger if we're late into June or July and we're ripping that water off and it's 90 degrees. So let's just plan on that coming up, and then let's mow it in 2 weeks, sever the growing point, and then all we're doing is stimulating that growth of that grass. Broadleafs do not like a mower. one thing I always see is the disc love, right? We love the disc harrow, right?
Mm-hmm.
My observation over the last 7-8 years of doing a lot more consulting work across Mississippi and Arkansas is that we probably over promoted that soil disturbance, meaning we've got people, that landowners that have good emergence but aren't patient enough. But if the soil's dried up enough, it's time to put the disc in. And
Yeah.
reality is, I think we're disking too deep for the most part. Deep disking really be reserved for problematic situations, infestations, like areas that we have got to turn a soil under and put organic matter down. When we have good mud flats and start to have emergence, the disc doesn't need to be in there. Mowing early third of the season is likely going to give us our best. That's common everywhere. Is the love of herbicide and the love of discs.
Yeah. And I've really tried to push a lot of folks that I've worked with in the past, and then when I was at the agency and doing technical guidance a lot with landowners, is that on the disking side of things, I think we have a lot of the old management handbooks and stuff that just really push that importance. And it's true, yes, you do need to do soil disturbance because this is early successional wetlands. You need to maintain it in an early successional state. So that is something you have to do every now and then. And I'm really just a big fan of just like getting to the end of the season when you're at everything is maxed out yield wise and looking around and being like, okay, this area over here is not that great.
Yep.
Well, let's do a fall or late summer
disc.
Yeah. Just disc this place, and then the next year you might disc another place in the unit, because you're going to see in these patchily disking where you're seeing like that needs disturbance because that's not promoting, that part of the unit's just not growing what I want it to grow. Slowly over a course of a few years, you'll disturb the whole place at some point probably. But when you do that spring or summer drawdown, whenever it is, the timing's best for your site and elevation and all that sort of thing, you're going to be able to, after that community starts to respond, you could ask somebody that wasn't there when you dissed it, like, where do you think I dissed? They could point it to you, because that's going to be growing some different stuff, and it's going to be growing some really good grassy kind of community, a lot of times is when that water comes off that really shallowly dissed stuff, it can really be a game changer. So I'm a big fan of kind of fall disking just in a rotational way, and mostly on places where it's like, that I got some crap there. I need to let's just disc that before flood up, and that'll give me a little bit of hemi marsh, that vegetation, open water look. And so it kills multiple birds with a single stone kind of thing. And that's what I try to promote a lot with landowners.
Yeah, and when you do need to do a blanket approach, heaven forbid, we just don't need to do that anywhere in terms of duck management. But when you do need to do it, maybe you've got plenty of annual smart weeds, and you want to get your grass communities back. Man, we're talking about top 1 to 2 inches of disturbance is what we're looking at here. I mean, you're better off spraying, burning, and then scratching it with a triple K cultivating type tool, a real shallow do-all. Have the right tools to do moist soil management, and you'll find that it is pretty affordable and pretty consistent, and you don't need to take a blanket approach. Spending all day on a tractor making passes is typically not going to get you the best response. Being targeted about where we want those plant communities to be is a much better approach. And
absolutely.
Man, spending time on your duck hole is difficult because everyone has to sacrifice that time elsewhere, whether that's families, whether that's other hobbies. A lot of people have to travel in, they're out of state landowners. So, man, going into it with a game plan and having a targeted approach to make sure that, hey, every tractor pass I put in here and every arrow here is getting me closer to the communities that I want to proliferate on my impoundments, or I'm creating the right type of habitat based on my long-term strategy.
Yep.
And organize those thoughts,
Yeah. And that's what I was going to say is keeping track of what you do and what the results are, kind of create that, that level of institutional knowledge you're going to have of this property. And you're going to build this knowledge bank of, and keeping some level of written records helps you maintain that and helps you reflect better and all that.
Or in pictures. I mean, use your phone. This iPhone right here is the number one management tool for most wildlife managers now.
Mm-hmm.
We can take
Oh yeah.
videos. It will tell you what happened 2, 3, 5, 6 years ago
Mm-hmm.
in your iCloud, and you'll have instant results. Hey, this is the day I did. This is where I did it, and this is also how many
Yeah.
ducks we shot that season. What worked?
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need to be so rigorous about note keeping. If we just are
No.
using the cell phone, it does a lot of management for me now. It automates so much of the decision making for me.
Yeah.
And something I want to kind of get into, if we can, is how we manage water across the hunting season. How are we
Mm-hmm.
positioning birds across our properties, our public lands, our region, and what is our strategy for making sure that, hey, we've got enough habitat, we're flooding the right habitat at the right time. There's a lot of strategies that are successful for landowners. I think it's a case by case basis, and again, it probably is some deficit type decision making. But the thing that I'm seeing right now, where we are back to kind of today, is
Mm-hmm.
we've got to start scaling up our flooding. I mean, we're getting down to December 2nd. The weather is indicating a large push of birds, and we're probably going to have to turn on some pumps if we can afford it.
Yep.
But we didn't turn on these pumps and run full bore for an opening day. Let's
Yeah.
be clear. 80 degrees, I don't need to have 100%
No.
flood capacity for 80-degree opener. And
Yeah.
I don't really need 100% flood capacity for the second opener in the first, second week of December. But I need to be trending.
Yeah.
And, where am I going to put this water? If I have 7 or 8 impoundments, what's my strategy on where I'm moving this water around to improve my hunting, to getting under ducks?
Exactly. And that's you don't we preach it all the time. If you don't have 100, you're not going to have peak duck abundance. You don't need to have peak habitat availability.
For sure.
And you need to plan that that incremental flood needs to be based on, it may change year to year because certain impoundments may, the way that summer goes, you're historically, this one's always great and I always flood this one pretty early and then I hold off and start incrementally flooding these others. Maybe which ones you start out with, or, wait to hold off till later. Maybe your really good food production one, you want to hold off until later to have it. You just want to have some, marginal stuff flooded early.
Absolutely.
Where that marginal and productive.
Yeah, target the stuff that's degrading the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
What I hate seeing is landowners that plant a lot of Japanese Chihuahua millet, get a great stand, and then they say, well, that's the food I got. Well, probably not. You probably got a lot of other stuff, but you're going to sit there and hold your cards until the very end when that plant is just degrading and you're losing the available seed and its quality is gone to nothing by the time you're putting water on it. We want to make sure we're putting water on the proper vegetation at the proper time in order to preserve as much of it as possible. So, let's use that example. The Chihuahua probably can be flooded a little later than the Japanese, but the Japanese, you need to be getting that water on relatively early in the season. You got blackbirds, you got a lot of songbirds, and you got weather just shattering that seed. Ducks will absolutely forage on that stuff, even if the seed's shattered. We don't want to make them work hard. We want to serve it on a silver platter. So let's flood those early. Let's wait on maybe our Chihuahua. Let's wait on our rice. I'm real bad about this, and my boss has always been on my butt about it. I wait and flood rice like December 25th to January 15th, depending on where we're at. And the reason why is they don't stop eating it. When we flood our unharvested rice, it is like a combine going through the field. So I've got to be very strategic about when I want that frenzy. And I typically do it on before a big cold front or maybe our last big expected push of the season, right, of northern birds. And I want to get that feeding frenzy going because I can make a lot of commotion in my little neck of the woods, and birds that are moving through the area, man, they know the party's there. When that field's fed out, it typically doesn't offer a ton, but now my birds are starting to spread out and utilize my other impoundments and following those birds that have been set up shop for months on end. So there's a lot of strategy behind the timing of, if I do grow agricultural crops or if I have moist soil, the timing of getting that water on there and when I want my ducks using it.
Yes, absolutely. And so that's something that is really key to try to get folks to think about, especially if they have enough varying impoundments and different crop steps and moist soil management and all those sort of things combined as a total wetland complex, how you strategize that flood up, because it's at, and I even, if I could say, I feel like I know better, but like, I even do that all the time. I had to talk myself out of like putting my boards in on one of my places for the last like couple of days. I'm like, that thing would about halfway fill up with this rain if I'd have put them in there, and I'm like, but
Well,
there's really
that's
no,
that's a great point there. So I don't
yeah,
turn away free water, but what
yeah,
I don't do is go to 100% capacity.
yeah,
So here's the great example of where we want to start a season. Well, I mean, I want to have my boards out. I want to collect water every place I can prior to season opening, because that's my base, right?
yeah,
I want to saturate that soil. I want to also have those borrow areas and those low areas next to my box risers to start filling up. Wood ducks are great about using potholes. They don't need but a
yeah,
half acre of water to make a living.
yeah,
Well,
oh yeah,
the wood ducks are the precursor for the mallards and everything else that fall on the same pattern. So I'm not going to say no to free water, but what I'm not going
yeah,
to do is allow a 4-inch rain to fill up my entire property to 100% capacity
yeah,
and then expect in January for us to have
yeah.
great success.
And that's my part on this one, is I know it's not quite the time, because
Yeah.
the one we get rain, because the way the watershed is and the way that the ditches run off the adjacent fields, it's like it just takes one good kind of frog choker of a rain to just like that whole thing's like at 100% capacity, So, and it doesn't, and the risers are not that tall. It's a fairly level area, and so but just a lot of water that flows into it, and so I just really I kicked myself twice this week. I was like, I should have put those boards in on Saturday, but no, I don't think it's quite ready yet. So I'll probably, I think I usually do it around Christmas time is when I go in and do that.
And that's when the
And
co-op
it
comes
has,
in handy, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm communicating with my neighbors. I know where they're at in capacity. We're working together to say, hey, we want to reach kind of our peak amount of available habitat around peak abundance, or when our county or locality really turns on, we want to be prepped up for it, and then.
yeah,
We want to make sure that we're keeping them there once it does happen, because Arkansas, especially, maybe not Mississippi, but I mean, it's a bell curve here, right? Like, we're
mm-hmm,
going to hit peak in at least this property that I'm at today in central, or east central Arkansas. It's going to hit its peak in the next 2 weeks, and it'll plateau and it'll decline in January, just because birds run out of resources, move around, find things they'd rather run. Also, man, the spring migration, depending on weather, for some ducks, kicks off really early, and they all have different strategies, but those strategies really collide for us at the top of that curve, and that's coming up for us in Arkansas. For Mississippi, it's a different point in the timeline, but it is
yeah,
going to occur,
oh yeah,
and we want to flatten that out. I want that plateau and that bell curve to flatten as long as possible, because that's going to give me the most hunting success.
yeah. And that's with that's a really good point to pull it back to kind of talking with your neighbors and having that kind of a cooperative kind of relationship there is kind of feeling out, what everybody's doing, and you're able to adjust your timing to their timing and make it where it works cohesively as a wetland complex to hold birds. And I would, again, like you said earlier, we hate to give the pine goat people credit, but they kind of
And they have
they
done a
they
great job.
when I remember they were doing here in Mississippi, there were several places that when I was with MDWF&P, the deer program guys and gals were like working with all these different cooperatives that like several DMAP clubs kind of coming together and sharing information and kind of, I was like, man, that's the way to move the needle on private lands, is to actually have people working together. And I randomly stumbled into an opportunity to do that with a group of landowners way down in the South Delta, kind of around Satarsha area, and like 4 or so of them all working together. All, like, at the time, our partners program was gangbusters, and we were delivering pipes and pads and all the things,
Fun
and
time.
mulching. Man, that was
That's
a
a lot of
time.
fun.
That was. I put a lot of habitat on the ground, me and Houston and the others in the partners program, in a very short period of time. But we did a bunch of partners projects across like 6 properties down there. They were all communicating with one another. I think to some degree they were kind of hunting with each other, and all
Yes.
that.
Yes.
And so it was working exactly like the way it should. And I still go back to that. I still zoom down on the map to that area and kind of take a look at like the diversity of wetlands that we created across those properties, all working together to know where they could pick up the missing links. Like one of them in the middle was like a GTR type situation. All they had was the GTR.
Yeah,
Well,
one-dimensional.
there was opportunity for moist soil in these areas. There was opportunity for some flooded crops in some areas, and it just all kind of came together. And like I said, they all hunted with each other on their properties, and it was just a great example of how those cooperatives can really benefit, a group of folks.
Yeah, and let's not sell short on the importance of maintaining land value and increasing land value. For guys in Mississippi, that's a source of pride. I mean, it's a lot of businessmen in this waterfowl management thing, and when you do that, when you create a cooperative in a wetland complex management team, you are insulating your property value. You are making sure that I'm part of a collection of properties that are valued very, very highly. And I am insulated from much of the market fluctuation that potentially can happen because we've been doing these practices collectively for long enough.
Yeah.
And that's the selling point for landowners is, look, it's great to own these places and enjoy them, but financially, for a lot of people, this needs to make sense. And that's a great way to leverage the cost of management, make sure your dollars are going the farthest, get the cost share stuff that you just mentioned because we're impacting enough acres together. But then also make sure that, hey, we're bringing the neighborhood up. We're increasing that land value and the neighborhood's getting better. And that attracts better landowners to the adjacents, right? And so now this complex is growing from the inside out. And that works really well. I have one point though that cracks me up about deer guys, and I just want to think about like how we would do this as duck people. And I guess with that point in the podcast, so we can have a conversation.
Yes.
About very hypothetical. Deer guys are great about managing harvest across multiple properties. Can you imagine if duck hunters owning different size tracts, very complementary potentially, but different size tracts, different involvement, managed harvest in days of field like deer hunters managed buck harvest and doe harvest? Like if we got that granular and specific on data that we said, hey, we have a target number of days that we're going to hunt. You have a target number of days that you're going to hunt. We're going to manage pressure collectively as a co-op. And by the way, we're gonna focus on quality over quantity. We're gonna try to, we all agree we want to hunt mallards. Well, how can we do that? We're gonna manage from what mallards want, but we're also probably not gonna shoot at wood ducks for the first hour every morning, in and amongst each other. It's stuff like that they've done that I don't know that we'll ever be able to embrace, but I have a dream that we could.
I think that's an interesting concept for sure, because, like you said, it's not going to be quite the same as them, because it's not like, well, we're going to, you can only shoot after hatchie or mallards, it's not going to be like, but it's, but certainly a pressure, like how long do you hunt? How many days do you hunt? And I am seeing a few that lead me to believe this might be possible one day. I'm getting a lot of folks that are just setting a time limit and saying it's 9:15, we're out. Whereas like they have everybody's got their mallard limit, or everybody has about 4 ducks. Now we could stay for another 3 hours and everybody scratch out those last 2. Or we can just call it at this time of morning, and that's just the time you go in. Doesn't matter how many birds you killed, kind of
breakfast
thing.
Is at this time.
Yeah.
I've done that, and I'll be honest with you, I'm split 50-50, and I think it's case-by-case basis based on property. We hunt a lot of high-traffic areas that just, on a regular basis, we might have 2 mallards by 8:30. And we're eating breakfast at 9:45 with 6 or 7 man limit of mallards. And so I don't ever want to just tell somebody you need a 9 o'clock rule and everyone around you does, because we're all hunting. Our strategy is hunting these birds are different, and the utilization across these areas is different. But what I do like to see is hey, let's have areas that have a bit of a time restriction. Like if we're going to go hunt a moist soil unit that is just jam up when the birds are on it, they're coming there first thing, and they're going to keep coming there till we get out. Well, then we need to get in and get out. But if we're hunting an area that is off the X, and it's purposely off the X, and say I'm entertaining 4 or 5 guys that are in town, there's nothing else to do in the Delta, if football's
Mm-hmm.
not on TV, so let's hunt till 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock. If you
Yeah.
can have one of those places on your property that is so far off the X that getting in and out does not affect what's going on elsewhere, stay,
Yeah.
enjoy your time, because
Yeah.
you being far enough away from the X and off the action is managing disturbance well enough to where stay as long as it's necessary. You're already
Mm-hmm.
in there, enjoy your time. Having kind of two different approaches there, two different types of duck holes is a really, really great idea. And just know that, like, hey, just because a club down the road has a 9 a.m. rule doesn't necessarily mean you do. Just because they have a 12 o'clock rule doesn't necessarily you need to go to 12 o'clock.
Yeah. So yeah, I think for sure there's some flexibility there, but it's a cool concept to think about
Absolutely.
with, how if you do have a cooperative, how could y'all think about managing pressure together in addition to just, hey, we're all talking about what we're doing habitat management wise. That's been obviously beneficial to them. Well, let's start talking about how we're going to manage pressure to see if that could be beneficial for us, and then some trial and error with that, and obviously don't get it to the point where it's turning into the detriment of the cooperative where you're going to start hating each other or anything.
I think right now where we're at is everyone waits on their neighbors to leave. Whoever quits
Yeah.
first is the loser, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of disturbance related to leaving and picking up stirs enough birds up, and a lot of times that's false hopes. Later in the season, it doesn't really do much for you, but I think
Yeah.
it's always been like, well, we just wait everybody out, and the
Yep.
flurries will come, and it definitely does occur early. I see it in Arkansas, man. 9:30,
And
10 o'clock when the pit hunters are leaving, the ducks, if the sun's shining, certainly, the ducks are coming to river bottoms, and
mhm.
that's disturbance related. It's a lot of it.
Yeah.
So that's probably not our best strategy, but it's where we're at right now.
Yeah. And I think about that, because on a lot of public land hunting, that's what
That's what it is.
that's what it is. It's just waiting it out. Cause I mean, it's back when, not back when we really had some good, mallard hunting at Knoxville over here, you just had to wait out those fair weather duck hunters, like the folks that are going to get the wood duck flight, hang around for an hour and then give up about 9:30, if you're hearing decoy bags banging against the back of legs on the
Get
on
ready.
the levee, you're like, okay, give it another 45 minutes to an hour, and this is gonna be on. And it would be, like you would between 11 o'clock and 12 when you had to stop shooting, you were gonna make hay while the sun shined. There was gonna be some good mallard hunting to be had. But
I see that
you
with
know,
mallards in the woods. Relatively calm, quiet, and almost non-existent, even though I've watched them land all around us all morning. But when I'm taking people in for breakfast, man, they start getting really, really worked up and chiming up and really getting gregarious
mhm,
and the behavior. So the courtship flight starts spinning off at 10:30, 11,
yeah,
12 o'clock, man. It's like, all right, now we're ready to be ducks again. We played
yeah,
that game. You're quiet. We let you do your duck hunting thing, but now we're going to get out and do what we need to do
mhm,
between these hours. And doesn't necessarily mean you would be able to shoot them during those hours. It just means that, hey, they've been programmed that, all right, there's cutoff. It's important for those ducks to have that time.
for sure, yeah.
That them having the ability to do that is one of the reasons why they're still there.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's it all goes back to, some pretty, simple ecological principles too. I mean, just the fact that like you could have the best habitat complex in the world, but if you hunted it all day, every day, ducks are going to go to crappier places to be able to do what they do. They're going to go choose lower quality opportunities because they're being pressured on high quality areas. And so it's just the way it is. Pressure's a big thing, and it's hard for us to measure it and quantify because it is so dynamic and tough. But
Well,
there are
there's a
some things.
quantifiable way that I see with landowners. The more money I
Yeah,
spend,
yeah,
the more I want to hunt. I mean,
yeah. Oh, yeah,
that's how you quantify it. It's a justification situation. It's,
for
well, I
sure. But I'm
bought this place, I spent this money, therefore I'm going to hunt, or I have a lease, so I'm going to go. Well, you didn't shoot ducks last 2 days. You're probably ruining next weekend by going again.
yeah,
And boy, I spent the money though. And
yeah,
ducks don't care. They
no,
don't. And we've got to start thinking past that and just go, all right, I'm invested in this for this. I'm gonna get out the enjoyment that the resource provides me to get out of it. I'm gonna find value in the stewardship of this place and having ducks
hmm
rather than shooting them. And if we can start shifting a mindset to that, well, then that justification is different now. But for a lot of young landowners, managers, leaseholders, it's quantified by, hey man, how much money did I spend? Well, that's how much I need to go.
yeah. because if I don't go, I haven't fully realized all of what I bought, you know. And so, yeah, it's a difficult thing to do, and I totally understand it. It's like so many other topics that we talk about, you know. It's like where there's some, you know, kind of conflicts between habitat management and agricultural systems. I mean, we have to accept the fact that's kind of, you know, these people need to make a living, you know, and they need to produce those crops. So we have to find that way we can work within that. And with the investment side and management, it's like it's a little harder in the lease situation, but in
Yeah,
the
for sure.
in the ownership situation, I think there is a way to slowly get you transitioned. It's just like that journey to becoming a hunter. You know, when you're young, it's like body count, you know, like I
Yep.
want to kill as many ducks as
Yep.
possible. And then as you get older, it's like, well, it's about spending time with my friends and
That dog, getting
watch
that
that
dog
dog,
good.
getting that dog out. Getting the dog out's the thing. Watching that dog retrieve 2 ducks is as good
Yeah,
as me killing 6 ducks without it.
for
And
sure.
so it's all those different things that kind of, or introducing someone new, you know. I took one of my techs this Sunday, first duck hunt I've had this year, because I've been trying to catch these things instead of shoot them so much. And they're frustrating the heck out of. They're more frustrating to me to catch than they are to shoot.
Well,
But but I took one of my techs who had never shot a duck before, and you know, I think I got to watch his pilot light for waterfowl hunting turn on, and it was like the best thing I'll probably see all season. Of course, I'm gonna try to take several of the other techs, so hopefully I get to see that multiple times this year.
very rewarding.
See a lot of firsts, and so that's something that drives that for me now. How much I hunt is like, okay, I've got people I want to get out on their first duck hunt. And so it all changes. I think that same thing can happen with management. You can get to the point where the management and the birds you see using your property are as much of a part of realizing that investment as the number of birds you shoot. And I think that's
100%.
the place to kind of work towards, so you can, when you do hunt, you're doing it better and you're killing more birds. Well, Ryan, I think we've gone way over an hour now at this point. So I think we probably, for the sake of our audience, need to wrap it up. You definitely need to come back again. We have some other topics we didn't get into that I'd really love to, you know, I'd really love to dive into some hot crop stuff a little bit more and talk about how some of that has changed, because it certainly has for some of our wintering. A lot of the very seasoned managers, you see some switching away from some of the hot crops for either alternative crops than corn or other things. And then, you know, does talk about the broader picture of corn's role and those sort of things. I think it'd be a good topic for us to jump into next. So
Sure,
let's
we
jump in.
ought to discuss the tech and the change, man. I mean,
Yeah.
management is absolutely on a tear in terms of
Yeah,
innovation right now, and
for
I think
sure.
landowners are going to end up being a real benefactor of some maybe more affordable and cutting edge tools going forward. That
Yeah.
I'm excited
Drones
to see
and
people.
all the things, you know,
Yep,
and drones are going to help, I think, significantly with our disturbance side of things
they
as
are.
far as scouting and all that.
Hey, it's important, but there's a right way to do it. Just with anything,
Yeah,
these are tools
exactly.
that they need to be in the right hands. And I think having a discussion about what is ethical and what is safely the best way to operate these tools is really
Yeah.
important. And I'd love to get with you and have that conversation
Yeah.
sometime.
Well, I think we need to get back together here in the next couple of months and do this again. Maybe after we kind of calm down from shooting and trapping ducks and everything else that we got going on the plate. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today, and let's get back and have another episode in the next couple.
Yeah, man. Look forward to seeing everybody out there in the field, and good luck, and be safe and have a great time.
Take care, man.
Thanks for joining us on Game Bird University Podcast. To keep up to date on when new episodes are dropped, or for more information on game birds and their management, you can follow us on Instagram at MSUEXT_GameBird, or follow us on Facebook at MSU Extension Game Bird Program.